Greetings, Otaku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm here to bring you all yet again another Sons of Anarchy episode review right here on Otaku Assemble! Weekly, as always, I'm here to bring you the latest in this week's Sons of Anarchy episode review. But before I jump into this review, I want to let you all know that I have an update on the Totems Issue 1 release at the end of this review, so please stick around for that. Now, this is my review of Season 5, Episode 8, entitled Ablation, and my general thoughts on the episode as a whole. Unfortunately, I did not care for this episode as much as some of the other ones in this season, and the reason for that is because this episode brought up a couple of issues that I have problems with, and I'll get into more detail as this review goes along. But hell, let's kick off this review with the first issue that was raised in this week's episode, and it's also one that I mentioned in last week's review, and that was Juice. Now, of course, you know, the preview for this week's episode suggests that maybe Eli was going to give up Juice in this week's episode, and of course we find out that hasn't happened yet. But what we did see in this week's episode was Juice coming clean with Clay, and you know, Clay just pretty much sweeping it under the rug for the time being. Now, first issue, I don't like the fact that Clay dismissed it the way he did, and the reason for that being is because Clay's actions and what he told Juice, now that Clay knows what Juice has done, it gives him leverage over Juice, which is what I don't like, because I fear that Clay is going to be able to shoehorn Juice. He's going to be able to bully him into doing something that he might not want to do, and, you know, pretty much blackmail, use that information as leverage against him to kind of get Juice on his side. Because earlier in the season, we saw that Juice was already pretty much siding up to Clay, and then in the last few episodes, you know, he's been kind of questioning that. You know, he's starting to question Clay, trying to figure this shit out. But now Clay has this information on him, so like I said, it's an issue. It brings up an issue and a potential conflict that I really want to see either resolved or I want to see done away with, but I don't like what that could mean for Juice's character. I don't like it. I also don't like the fact that if Eli gets his way, he's turning Juice over. I mean, I don't think Eli is talking about anybody else at that table. He's going to turn Juice over. Jax is going to kill Juice. So, pretty much what this episode illustrates is that Juice is damned if he does. Well, I mean, Juice is kind of already laid his bed, if you will. Clay knows, so now Clay could potentially use that information as leverage against Juice. And Eli, of course, you know, Juice was his informant, and now Eli's offering to hand this over to Jax. So it doesn't seem like it's going to end well for Juice. And honestly, I think it's undercutting Juice's character development. And what I mean is, I don't see Juice's character arc being finished. I think that Juice, there's so much more that he could do, but I'm afraid that he's going to just become a literary casualty. That's my fear, that, you know, Juice is just going to get snuffed, and that's it. With no type of resolution. I mean, we know what happened last season has pretty much been, well, his ass is kind of out of the fire, but now, like I said in this week's episode, now this shit's starting to come back at him. But the thing is, I never felt like that thing was fully resolved. I don't feel like Juice has had an opportunity for change. I don't feel like Juice is getting the chance to, you know, turn this shit around and to make the best of it, because now, you know, those skeletons are starting to come out of the closet. So that's the first issue. Second issue I have has to do with Gemma. Now, of course, we saw this shit happening, and of course, you know, Assessments from last week's review were right. You know, Gemma was stoned, and that's what caused the accident, of course. Now, granted, I was surprised to see that Clay was the one who came up with the story about her being driven off the road instead of Gemma herself. I was surprised by that, but then, of course, that lie came out. My concern is with Jax's proposal at the conclusion of this week's episode, because now Jax is enlisting Gemma's help to spy against Clay, right? But remember, he's not asking her. He's pretty much telling her, look, either you're going to do this for me or you're not going to see your grandkids again. He's giving her an ultimatum. I don't like that. Number one, Gemma cannot be trusted, because remember, even with the shit that Gemma, brought to Jax's, eyes, remember at the end of last season, she told Jax that Clay was responsible for killing JT, but she completely left herself out of the mix. Gemma cannot be trusted. She's the master manipulator. You see what I'm saying? So number one, I wouldn't get in bed with her to begin with. Number two, Jax is asking her to spy on Clay. As good as Gemma is, I got a feeling Clay's gonna find out. I got a feeling that Gemma won't be able to pull that off as well as she thinks she could. And the reason for that is this. No matter how good of a manipulator Gemma may be, what character on this series knows Gemma better than Gemma? Clay. So okay. So Jax, let me get this straight. I'm talking to Jax as a hypothetical. Let me get this straight, Jax. So you're pretty much giving your mother an ultimatum to spy on her husband in order to get information about him being responsible for the break-ins and everything. However, you're pitting her up against the person who, if anyone was going to see through Gemma's bullshit, he would be the first one. That doesn't seem smart to me. Of course, hey, look, Jax could have this whole fucking thing under control. He could have, contingencies in place to where if shit happens, because Jax is good at, he's good at this type of shit. See season 3 for proof of that. The season 3 finale. Jax is good at this shit. But like I said, it's problematic, and I have an issue with it. I don't like it, this plan could so easily backfire. It's not even funny. So that's the second issue with this week's episode I had. The third and my final issue would have to be the thing with Frankie. And this is what I mean. Number one, I didn't expect the whole, search for Frankie thing to last this long. It seems like next week's episode is going to pretty much focus on the hunt for Frankie. But I expected this thing to kind of be wrapped up in this week's episode. So the fact that Frankie's still on the lam, okay. But that's not that big of an issue. What concerns me is, when Frankie showed up at Nero's place, when he showed up at the warehouse and whatnot, so many questions came to mind with that. Number one, did Frankie do that independently, or did Clay know? You see what I'm saying? Did Clay know that Frankie was going to do that? Number two, if Frankie did it independently, why would he do that? Because my thing is this: Frankie went ahead and hired, the guys who went after Jax and Chibs at the end of last week's episode, right? Okay, Frankie did that. Now here's my question. Did Clay know? Because that seems like a pretty desperate move, however, that would fall in line with what Clay would want. Because remember, Clay is still trying to pass this thing off as, Pope being responsible. So, okay, that would make sense. But what I'm saying is, Frankie going to Nero's place, that's a desperate, and of course, he was desperate. He was desperate. So here's my thing. Number one, did Clay know about it? Number two, did Clay know about, the hired guns? And then number three, Does Frankie know that Clay set up the other two nomads? Because these questions are going to be very significant to how this whole thing plays out. Because what's suggested in the preview for next week's episode is that Clay is actually going after Frankie himself to kind of snuff him out, to tie up that loose end. Because remember, Frankie could get up. Well, I mean, shit, Frankie already gave up Clay, which brings up another question. Because of course Clay suspects that Jax knows, right? Because of, you know, what Jax and Wayne did in last week's episode. So Clay already suspects that Jax knows. But he doesn't know that Frankie told him. He doesn't know that Jax has confirmation. So all these things, you see what I'm saying, are going to play a role. These questions have to be answered, because depending on the answer of these questions, that's how this shit's going to play out. That's how it's going to be concluded. And hell, I got a feeling that all this shit's going to come to a head, because I got a feeling that it won't be Frankie getting caught by one or the other. I think Clay and Jax are going to meet up in catching him. Or hell, he might just take it out of both of their hands and do himself in. Who knows? But like I said, it's an issue I have because it's problematic. I mean, hell, just from a narrative standpoint. Also, one more note I want to make about this thing. I don't want the thing with, you know, Frankie to drag on too long. And the reason for that being is because we're already, what? This is episode 8. There's only, what, 12 episodes in the season? So we only got like, well, okay. Yeah, we only got like 4 episodes left. And I'm expecting another pivotal, another significant, another important plot, you know, element to occur. I'm expecting, you know, something bigger to happen to, you know, to wrap this season up. So dragging this thing with Frankie out any longer, you see what I'm saying? It's less time that they have for something else. So that got to get wrapped up. Okay, so closing thoughts on the episode. First off, is anybody else enjoying Pope as much as I am? Because I mean, every time Pope's on fucking screen, I fucking love it. I love it. I like the fact that Jax and Nero finally, you know, that there was finally an exchange where they both were taking opposing odds on something. You know, they finally had an argument. And granted, remember what Jax told Nero? He said that he heard him, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's, taking his advice to heart. I think he just, took it under consideration, and he's going to do whatever the fuck he wants to. But like I said, I'm glad that happened, because for an intriguing and an engaging relationship between two characters, it can't just be all sunshine and fucking rainbows, At some point in time, especially with the fact that they're kind of on opposing sides with the whole Gemma issue, that was bound to happen. I'm glad that it happened sooner rather than later. I'm glad that it was rather civil. Granted, I mean, I enjoy a fight as much as the next person, but I'm glad it didn't have to come to that there's some type of mutual understanding between these two, as far as at least being civil with one another. There's no animosity. There's no ill will that one wishes upon the other. So I like it. I like where that relationship is going. And then, of course, I mean, I got to close this thing out with Jax. I mean, hell, the brutality with Jax, the coldness, that switch, that light switch that got flicked after Opie died, man. Jax is just brutal. Cutting off motherfuckers' hands, shooting cats, and, throwing them off buildings. I mean, Jax is just a ruthless vato at this time. So, but it's like I said, I mean, this is that was expected, and it makes sense that this is the road that Jax is going down from now on. It all makes sense. So Sons gets a nod for keeping up with that. So that's going to do it for this week's Sons of Anarchy episode review. In the comments below, let me know your thoughts on this week's episode, but also, and as many of you do, and believe it or not, I loved it more. I really do I like hearing you all's theories, predictions, what's going to happen in next week's episode based off the preview. I like that stuff. And I like the line of dialogue that gets created in the comments. So guys, keep it coming, because it's good stuff. It's really good stuff. We pretty much got our own little Sons of Anarchy message board in the comments. It's pretty cool. I like it. What to keep an eye out for later this week. This week I will be Arrow review tomorrow night, but I will be bringing the discussion of the week and the comic book Hollywood segments back this weekend. But quick note, the discussion of the week, there is right now currently a potential for a special discussion of the week. I'm currently in talks with a few people about getting something like that going, but if we can get it going, it's going to be good. So I'll keep you all posted. I'll keep you all updated on what's going on with that. Now, since we're talking about updates, let's talk about the Totems issue 1 release. For those of you all who don't know what I'm talking about, Totems is my comic book miniseries that I am self-publishing, and the first issue has been completed. So guys, it's been finished. What happened was, originally we were planning to release it digitally tomorrow. However, we ran into a couple of technical snags, and so pretty much where the book is right now, it's in post-production. The book's been completed, but it's in post-production. We are currently working on formatting and optimizing it for a mass digital release, as well as getting all our ducks in a row for the exclusive print run. So that's what's going on right now. Estimated time of completion, this process is pretty much going to take a couple of weeks, but don't worry. As far as the whole being delayed temporary, like I said, it's just temporary. It won't take long. Like I said, couple of weeks, and then we should be all good. That's where we're at right now. It's in post-production. So for those of you all, like I said, I apologize. First time self-publishing, so you can't. And granted, I did not expect this much technical difficulty. I didn't know how technical this thing was even after the book was finished. I didn't expect that. But you live and you learn from your mistakes, and you keep moving forward. I think though you all will be pleased with the final product, and I want to thank you all who have bared with me this long. So we're still at work. We're getting that done. We're going to get it to you guys. With that being said, this has been Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief. I'm signing off, and until next time, peace.